The Elohim, the concealed creation, biblical and church fathers explain what we usually read in the beginning of the Genesis of the Bible, which is quite confusing. And according to what they call Elohim, the Nephilim, and the Genesis giants. Now, every change and recovery of our freedom starts with knowledge. This is written by Moses, a monk from Preveza, a Christian Orthodox monk from Preveza, Father Moses. Now, as serious as the concealment of God's first creation once was, the revelation of this fraud that hides even today knowledge of cosmology and history of mythological past, for example, Greek mythology, is just as serious. Their agents are from the umpteenth time also within the church. Even the church is not knowledgeable of what they're teaching or reading. So this knowledge was given in recent years by other researchers and historians and writers, but not by clergy. And those who dare to speak these truths attach to them the epithet of error and heresy. Well, of course, when you're taught lies from a young age in school, in the church, in the family, everywhere, anywhere, anyway, and someone is found to confess the truth to you, it's the crazy one, and the many, the rational ones. This is how the impure manage to have us in a chaotic, chronotic rivalry between ourselves, and from behind there are always those that are never in our eyes. Now, the topic is huge, which is why it cannot be exhausted in just a few pages. He says, I'm going to quote, but be patient till in the end you'll see some of the proofs and reasons for the concealment of the 201 Elohim, God's creation. So it is terrible how in the space of truth that is the church, no one dares to oppose the false establishment of what's been set up. Not only today, of course, the case of concealment is ancient. The church does not accept the existence of the first creation created by God, while there are references in the Holy Bible, even in the texts of saints, paradoxical things. The first Christian saints talked about the first creation. And the monk says here, before I give you the evidence, I'd like to tell you the main reason at the outset. For example, Greeks must not learn that our origin is related to the good descendants of the illicit intercourse of the Elohim and the women who were the Olympians, wise according to God, who were passionate but just and philanthropic, while the origin of many people or the mentality of their people has a more direct relationship with other descendants, and Elohim with daughters of men. Now, in the end, to hide from us that the rulers of the Illuminati Zionist world take orders from them. Now, just as the evil one convinces men that he does not exist, the devil that is, so the dark ones do not want to be seen because their faces and their works will be revealed, and we will clearly not follow them, whom at first our Olympian ancestors and their heroes fought, defeated them, beginning with the sinking of Atlantis, and sometimes they sank them into the bowels of the earth, as Alexander the Great did with the dog-faced humanoids of China and India that he locked in underground caves and built pyramids on top of. So that's why the church frantically insists that man has 7,500 years of life, while it's now scientifically proven that we have many thousands of years of life on earth. They do not want us to go further back in time, because there we'll see the functional work of our ancestors and their own history. Now, without any reference to biblical texts, I have read the entire Old Testament. The church dates man, the first lie, and the second, it makes no reference to the first luminous creatures with human beings, but with supernatural powers and knowledge as the first creation of God. That is, God first created the Elohim, then the angels, and then finally man. However, in addition, the world historical reports of other peoples from apocryphal Christian texts, so the church called them because their truths did not bring it. We also have written reports from saints of the first 3 centuries of Christendom, as well as passages from the Holy Bible. This is how the next generations of Christians got the pseudonymous knowledge of course, also saints, and as you understand, they could not oppose those who understood what was going on because they would be slandered as heretics as well. So those who have always infiltrated the church take excellent advantage of the virtue of obedience to Christ, to their own wills, and use it as a Trojan horse to accomplish their goals. The subject was never raised in the ecumenical council because the saints of the first 3 centuries who left us written texts where they speak clearly about the Elohim and the Nephilim should be anathema. Okay, so the first saints clearly talked about the Elohim and the Nephilim, Anunnaki. And then they were told not to talk about this at all. Now, the monk says here, I will start with the first forgery made by the 72 quote-unquote wise men of the Jews before Christ. What a coincidence. 72 are also the Nephilim races, where they will invade the earth at the end of the end times. A reference to the unclean races, the abominable races, that is the Nephilim, by St. Andrew, the fool for Christ. These crafty 72 who translated served dark purposes of falsifying history, where they translated prophetic and historical texts written in Hebrew, some of which were included much later as a First Testament in our church. The reason, as they say, was so that the Greek converts to Judaism or Greek-speaking Jews could also read them. But be that as it may, the effect was to conceal the creation and work of the first beings that God's love created. No one from the church showed us the originals of the First Testament, where the word Elohim is written over 2,500 times, but this word is proven not to mean God. It is not Jewish, it is of divine origin. After all, the Jews did not mention or write the word God. In the 6th chapter of Genesis, Genesis 6, the translation Hebrew text reads, quote, the angels of God, the original reads Elohim, saw the daughters of men that they were beautiful, and they took as wives those who they pleased, end quote. If Elohim meant God, then we are clearly headed for blasphemy. Later, the 4th century church changed it to sons of God, quote unquote. Second forgery. Because they reasonably assumed that the angels were incorporeal, is it absurd? But the original text did not count them, written as Elohim. Otherwise, absolute confidence in the translation of the Hebrews. To the enemies of Christ and the Greeks, it's reasonable to understand that the church of the great forgery of 380 had entered its enemies, that is, the First Ecumenical Council. The rabbis themselves say that this word is not Hebrew and does not mean God, but the Septuagint each time translates the word Elohim as they wanted and as it suited them, like God, sons of God, angels, good people, judges. The word God in Hebrew is called Adonai. The children of the intercourse of the Elohim with the women of men were called giants, titans, who were anthropomorphic, and Nephilim later, those who were monstrous, which means fallen. They have a reference to these descendants in the book Numbers of the Old Testament in the years 1450 BC about. The spies whom Moses had sent to check the promised land returned, and the report they gave was as follows. Quote, we saw there the descendants of Anak, the giants. It is a land that devours its inhabitants, and all whom we saw there are big men. We still saw there giants, the descendants of Anak from the generation of giants, end quote. Numbers 13, 25 to 33. Other testimonies from the First Testament, Exodus chapter 20, 1 to 4. And the Lord spoke all these things, saying, I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. There are no other gods besides me. You have made for yourself an idol, not a likeness of anything. Whatever is in the sky above, and whatever is in the earth below, and whatever is in the waters under the earth, Nephilim. See below how serious atopy the septuagenarians fell from the many paraphrases they made. Genesis 19:24, in modern Greek translation, then the Lord rained brimstone and fire on Sodom and Gomorrah from the Lord from heaven. The original reads, and Elohim rained on Sodom and Gomorrah sulfur and fire from Adonai, God, from heaven. From the Psalms of David, Psalm 8:6, quote, you have blessed him with short orders, the original says Elohim, you have crowned him with glory and honor, end quote. Psalm 81:1, quote, God is in the assembly of gods, and in the midst of gods he discerns, end quote. The Hebrew text says this, Adonai, Lord, stood in the synagogue of Elohim, and in the midst Elohim discerns, end quote. Psalm 103:4, quote, those, quote, whose angels are his spirits and ministers. The original says Elohim, fire and flame, end quote. Clear reference to two creatures. Psalm 135, confess to the Lord that he is good, that he is. Confess to the God of gods, that he is. We also have here, as above, a reference to the word God with a small g. Okay, confess to the God of gods, gods with a small g. That is, to the Olympians, descendants of the Elohim, from the sky, which means I run fast. Psalm 148, praise the Lord from the earth, dragons and all the deep. Epistle to the Philippians, quote, in the name of Jesus, tell all things in the heavens and the earth, and bowed down, hence the underworld, Nephilim. Philippians 2:10. The book of Revelation, the strongest testimony and proof for the existence of Nephilim, and no one was able in heaven or on earth nor under the earth to open the book or see it. Revelation 5:3. No one was able in heaven or on earth nor under the earth. So of course there are Nephilims that live underneath the earth. Quote, and every creature in the heavens and on earth and under the earth, on the sea is, and the things in them, Revelation 5:12-13. All the buildings will worship the Lord, saying, everything created will worship the Lord, says the Apocalypse, and those who live under the earth, in Tartara, according to the Greek novel. So we have dozens of references about life under the earth, where they attest to the residence of the Nephilim. Second letter of the Apostle Peter 2:4 in translation, quote, for if God did not have pity even on the angels who sinned and chained them in the dark Tartarus, so that they are kept until the day of judgment, end quote. It is a given that he does not mean the fallen angels from the order of Lucifer, because they circulate among us and persecute us, whom the Apostle Paul calls them cosmocrators of this world. Epistle of Jude, verse 6, quote, but the angels who did not keep their authority, but left their place, he confined for the judgment of the great day in darkness with eternal bonds, end quote. We said the disembodied devil's angels have not yet been bound. Let's go to saints. Saint Justin, the great martyr and philosopher, 150 AD. Quote, the provision of men, but also of that are under heaven on earth, he handed over to the angels Elohim, whom he appointed for his work. And the angels, violating these orders, were defeated by their intermingling with women and gave birth to children who are the so-called demons, and besides, they made the human race their own slaves, end quote. So this is what Justin Martyr, St. Justin, wrote, 150 AD. He says he clearly does not mean the angels of Lucifer, devil, who also fell, because they are incorporeal. Here the saint names the Nephilim, demons, according to Ming, volume M6, page 452. Another saint, Saint Hieromartyr Prophet Methodius of Patara, The creation of angels, Elohim, was made by God to exercise care over his creations. So the total and general providence of all that God has would constitute the prestige and power of all, and the special and partial providence would be given to the angels assigned to his work, the Elohim. But while the rest of the angels remained in the work for which God had created and appointed them, he, Satan, cunningly incited envy against men to those entrusted with the administration, angels. So they also, after these, lusted after the flesh, and persuaded the daughters of men with words to have intercourse with them, because God gave them the power to have free will, choice, both for good and for evil, as he had given to humans. Saint Clement of Alexandria. Characteristically, Saint Clement is in another passage writes, among other things, an example for you that the angels who left the beauty of God for a withering beauty and thus fell under the sky. And then we have Saint Eusebius of Caesarea, the father of church history. And then we have Saint Andreas for Christ, the fool for Christ, saying, in that year the Lord will open the gates of the India, which had been closed by the Macedonian king Alexander the Great, and 72 kings and peoples will pour out from there, from the bowels of the earth, the so-called filthy nations, the Nephilim, the abominable nations, the Nephilim, who have no equal in disgust and stench. They will be scattered all over the world. They will eat raw human flesh and drink their blood. They will still devour with great pleasure dogs, mice, frogs, flies, and all uncleanness. End quote. From the book of the Holy Monastery of Parakletos. Then we have St. Gregory of Thessaloniki. Chapters Natural Theological. Quote, 2 zones of the earth are respectively temperate and inhabitable, according to the sages of the Greeks. Each one is divided into 2 more and thus become 4. That is why they maintain that there are 4 races of people on earth which cannot communicate with each other. For according to these sages, there are people who inhabit the region opposite to us from the sides, who are separated from us by the scorched zone of the earth. Opposite them dwell, in their opinion, those who live below this zone. In a similar way, there are those who dwell below us. They call their fronts objects to us, while the others opposite and inverted, and all this because they do not know that apart from 1/10 of the earth's sphere, almost all the rest is covered by the waters of the abyss. That's according to St. Gregory. Now, there are other references to saints. For lack of space, I stop here, the monk says. Josephus, Jewish historian, notes to volume of patristic texts from Ming, for many of God's angels have intermarried with women, gave birth to children who were a disgraced Nephilim, hence abortion, and who were proud of everything good because they were confident of their power. And similarly, the abusive children of the Nephilim, acted with the giants that the Greeks say attacked them. Amazing and detailed account of the Elohim and their fall is written by the righteous Enoch. I have studied this book, the Book of Enoch. The church rejects it, calling it occult. The Enoch, of course, talks about the fallen angels and Nephilim. The initial of the word El-Las, or Helene, comes from the word Elohim, who before they fell were bright and ministers of God on earth, El meaning light or God. That what reason made the church and the saints consequently after the 4th century change their attitude and reach the point of anathematizing those who spoke about Elohim and Nephilim, that is, without understanding it. They also anathematized the apostles who spoke and wrote about this. They had to show the world that the pagan gods never existed, because the pagan religions threatened to tear away part of the flock. But who created these religions? But usually the priesthood of others and those that did not become Christians. Now, for them who never existed, they had to have never been born. Thus, their ancestors, the fallen angels, Elohim, should never have come to earth. So the Christians changed the verse of Genesis 6:2 and from angels they made it sons of God. This was also the collaboration of the Spanish Jewish Emperor Theodosius. From time immemorial, these Nephilim were faced only by the Olympians and later by the Els and the descendants of those who were other ancestors such as Dionysus, who locked them underground, and in China 3000 BC, Hercules, and then lastly Alexander the Great. The Nephilim and their offspring on earth, along with their minions, the humans, the ones without a trace of humanity, do not want us to know the power our race possesses. That's why they hide from us our history, which has a direct relationship and origin from the good descendants. Now, thus they contrive to turn history into mythology in the sense of a fairy tale and not to the precise meaning of the word. So we should know our practical origin because they fear that this knowledge will lead to a recovery of old power. This is what Alexander the Great had said to his warriors in India when he revealed to them that he had God's command to crush and close the 3-meter check the werewolves underground, because the Nephilim, in collaboration with the devil, instigate and direct the evil course of the world. With God's tolerance, they never forget, since until the second coming, some will be alive, their enemies, and who locked them in darkness in the Tartarus. That is why we will never rest from them. The church cooperated in this, which is sometimes directed by them, the dark ones, just like in our time. Now finally, open your mind and don't accept direct knowledge. The Church of Christ is not of expediency, and not of expediency goes hand in hand with truth, honesty, sacrifice, selflessness, and love. So this was written by a monk, a Christian Orthodox monk, Father Moses, a monk from Preveza, concerning what they have been hiding from us, basically the book of Enoch, okay, concerning the Elohim and the Nephilim. And this I've translated for you from a Greek article. Please leave your comments and thank you for your support. Kindly support my Patreon account. The daily posts are 5 videos daily, and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box below.